Hi everyone, and welcome to another part of Capablanca's chess fundamentals. The customary quote, "You cannot live your life to please others. The choice must be yours." The White Queen from Alice in Wonderland. A brief review of the last part, where we concluded chapter 4 of the book after discussing the topics cutting off pieces from the scene of action and a player's motives criticized in a specimen game. So now, moving further into the book, Capablanca starts the next chapter, Endgame Strategy. He writes, "We must now revert once more to the endings. Their importance will have become evident to the student who has taken the trouble to study my game with Janowski. Example 53. After an uneventful opening, Re Lopez, in one of its normal variations, my opponent suddenly made things interesting by offering the exchange, an offer which of course I accepted. Then followed a very hard, arduous struggle in which I had to defend myself against a very dangerous attack made possible by the excellent maneuvering of my adversary. Finally, there came the time when I could give back the material and change off most of the pieces and come to an ending in which I clearly had the advantage. But yet, the ending itself was not simple as it at first appeared, and finally, perhaps through one weak move on my part, it became a very difficult matter to find a win. Had I been a weak endgame player, the game would probably have ended in a draw, and all my previous efforts would have been in vain. Unfortunately, that is very often the case among the large majority of players. They are weak in the endings, a failing from which masters of the first rank are at times not free. Incidentally, I might call attention to the fact that all the world's champions of the last 60 years have been exceedingly strong in the endings. Morphy, Steinitz, and Dr. Lasker had no superiors in this department of the game while they held their titles. Moving further, Capablanca starts the next topic under the heading number 26, the sudden attack from a different side. He writes, "I have previously stated when speaking about general theory that at times the way to win consists in attacking first on one side, then granted greater mobility of the pieces to transfer the attack quickly from one side to the other, breaking through before your opponent has been able to bring up sufficient forces to withstand the attack. This principle of the middle game can sometimes be applied in the endings in somewhat a similar manner." Example 56. In the position on board, I, with the black pieces, played Rook e4 check, Rook e2, Rook a4, Rook a2, and h5. The idea, as will be very soon seen, is to play h4 in order to fix white's kingside pawns with a view to the future. It is evident to black that white wants to bring his king to b3 to support his two weak isolated pawns and thus to free his rooks. Black therefore makes a plan to shift the attack to the king's side at the proper time in order to obtain some advantage from the greater mobility of his rooks. Rook d1 and Rook a5 in order to force the rook to a1, keeping both rooks tied up. Rook a1, h4, King d2, King g7, King c2, and Rook g5. Black begins to transfer his attack to the king's side. Rook g1, a serious mistake which loses quickly. White should have played king b3, when black would have answered rook a5, f3, and black would have obtained an opening at g3 for his king, which in the end might give him the victory. So rook g1 and rook f4. Now the white king cannot go to b3 because of rook b5 check. King d3, rook f3 check, and king e2. If g takes f3, rook takes g1, followed by rook h1, winning. So king e2, rook takes h3, and black won after a few moves. Example 57. Another good example in which is shown the advantage of the greater mobility of the pieces in an ending is the following from a game Capablanca vs Kupchak, played at the Havana Masters Tournament 1913. The full score and notes of the game can be found in the book of the tournament. White's only advantage in the position on board is that he possesses the open file and has the move, which will secure him the initiative. There is also the slight advantage of having his pawns on the queen side united, while black has an isolated a-pawn. The proper course, as in the previous ending, is to bring the rooks forward so that at least one of them may be able to shift from one side of the board to the other, and thus keep black's rooks from moving freely. What this means in general theory has been stated already. It really means keep harassing the enemy, force them to use their big pieces to defend pawns. If they have a weak point, try to make it weaker or create another weakness somewhere else, and their position will collapse sooner or later. If they have a weakness and they can get rid of it, make sure that you create another weakness somewhere else. From the position in question, the game continued thus: rook e4 and rook e8, with the object of repeating white's maneuver and also not to allow white the control of the open file. Rook e1, rook e6, rook e3, rook e8, king f1, and king f8. Black wants to bring his king to the center of the board in order to be nearer to whatever point white decides to attack. The move is justified at least on the general rule that in such endings the king should be in the middle of the board. He does nothing after all but follow white's footsteps. Besides, it is hard to point out anything better. If d5, rook g4 check, followed by king e2, would leave black in a very disagreeable position. If f5, rook d4, rook takes e3 question mark, f takes e3, rook takes e3, king f2, rook e7, and rook a4, winning the a-pawn, which would practically leave white with a passed pawn ahead on the queen side, as the three pawns of black on the king side would be held by the 2 of white. So king f8, king e2, king e7, rook a4 and rook a8. The student should note that through the same maneuver, black is forced into a position similar to the one shown in the previous ending. Rook a5. This move has a manifold object. It practically fixes all of black's pawns except the d pawn, which is the only one that can advance 2 squares. It specially prevents the advance of black's f pawns and at the same time threatens the advance of white's f pawns to f4 and f5. By this threat, it practically forces black to play d5, which is all white desires, for reasons that will soon become evident. d5, c4 and king d6. Evidently forced, as the only other move to save a pawn would have been d takes on c4, which would have left all black's pawns isolated and weak. If d4, rook e4, king d6, b4, rook e5, rook a6, and black's game is hopeless. So king d6, c5 check, king d7, d4 and f5. Apparently very strong, since it forces the exchange of rooks because of the threat rook h6, but in reality it leads to nothing. The best chance was to play rook g8. But f5 was played by black in the game and play continued with rook takes e6, f takes e6 and f4. Up to now, white has played with finesse, but this last move is weak. Rook a6 was the proper way to continue so as to force black to give up his a pawn or c pawn. So f4, king c8 and king d2. Again a bad move. Rook a3 was the proper continuation, and if then rook b8, b3, king b7, b4, king a8 and rook b3 with excellent winning chances. In fact, I believe a one game. So king d2 and king b7. Black misses his only chance. Rook b8 would have drawn. So king b7, rook a3, rook g8, rook h3, rook g7, king e2, king a6, rook h6, rook e7, king d3 and king b7. He goes back with the king to support his e-pawn and thus be able to utilize his rook. It is, however, useless, and only white's weak play later on gives him further chances of a draw. h4, king c8 and rook h5. To prevent the black rook from controlling the open file. King d7, rook g5, rook f7, king c3 and king c8. He must keep his king on that side because white threatens to march with his king to a6 via b4. King b4, rook f6, king a5, king b7, a4, a6, h5 and rook h6. He can do nothing but wait for white. The text move stops white from moving his rook, but only for one move. b4 and rook f6. The only other move was king a7 when white could play rook g7 or even b5. So rook f6 and b5, a weak move which gives black a fighting chance. In this ending, as is often the case with most players, white plays the best moves whenever the situation is difficult and requires handling. But once his position seems to be overwhelming, he relaxes his efforts, and the result is nothing to be proud of. The right move was rook g7. So b5, a takes b5, a takes b5, rook f8, rook g7, rook a8 check, king b4, c takes b5, king takes b5, rook a2, c6 check, king b8, rook takes h7, rook b2 check, king a5, rook a2 check, king b4 and rook takes f2. Black misses his last chance. Rook b2 check, forcing the king to c3 in order to avoid the perpetual, would probably draw. The reader must bear in mind that my opponent was then a very young and inexperienced player, and consequently deserves a great deal of credit for the fight he put up. So rook takes f2, rook e7 and rook takes f4. Rook b2 check followed by rook h2 offered better chances. So rook takes f4, h6, rook takes d4 check, king b5, rook d1, h7, rook b1 check, king c5, rook c1 check, king d4, rook d1 check, king e5, rook e1 check, king f6, rook h1, rook e8 check, king a7, h8 queen, rook takes h8, rook takes h8, king b6, king takes e6, king takes c6, king takes f5, king c5, king e5, c6, rook h6, king b5 and king d4, where black resigned the game. The ending shows how easy it is to make weak moves and how often, even in master play, mistakes are made and opportunities lost. It shows that so long as there is no great advantage of material, even with a good position, a player, no matter how strong, cannot afford to relax their attention even for one move. Moving further, Capablanca starts the next topic under the heading number 27, the danger of a safe position. He writes, example 58. A good proof of the previous statement is shown in the following ending between Meixsell and Kupchak in one of their two games in the same tournament, Havana 1913. It is evident that Meixsell white is under great difficulties in the above position. Not only is he bound to lose a pawn, but his position is rather poor. The best he could hope for was a draw, unless something altogether unexpected happened, as it did. No reason can be given for Black's loss of the game except he felt certain of having the best of it with a pawn more, and what he considered a safe position. That he became exceedingly careless and did not consider the danger that actually existed. Let us see how it happened. G4 and rook takes a2. The mistakes begin. This is the first. Black sees that he can take a pawn without any danger and does not stop to think whether there is anything better. Rook f2 check was the right move. If then king g3, rook takes a2. If instead white played king e4, then rook e5 check, followed by rook takes a2. So rook takes a2, rook d1, and rook a4 check. Mistake number 2, and this time such a serious one as to almost lose the game. The proper move was to play f5 in order to break up white's pawns and at the same time make room for the black king, which is actually in danger, as will soon be seen. So rook a4 check, rook d4, and rook a5. Mistake number 3, and this time fatal. His best move was rook g to a5. After the text move rook a to a5, there is no defense. Black's game is lost. This shows that even an apparently simple ending has to be played with care. From a practically one position, Black finds himself with a lost game, and it has only taken 3 moves. Rook d8 and rook g7. If f5, rook h8 check, king g6, rook g8 check, king f6, rook takes h6 check, rook g6, g5 check, king e7, rook takes g6, f takes g6, rook g7 check, king e8, rook takes g6, and wins easily. So rook g7, h4, h5, and rook h8 check, where Black resigned the game. The reason is evident. If king g6, g takes h5 check, rook takes h5, rook takes h5, king takes h5, rook h8 check, king g6, and h5 mate. Alright, we conclude this part of Capablanca's chess fundamentals here, and we shall continue onwards from the next one. Here is a look at the recent channel support. Several new supporters: Attacking Theory, Jacques Barry, Chess Beaming, Berenburger, Chess Kipitzer, BertiBison, Setlandin, awenchess, and GP Bear. Thank you for the kind support, everyone. Much appreciated. Alright, till next time, take care.